All right, good evening. What we're going to look at today is how to use this new competency-based learning auto report card that I've developed this weekend to automatically populate standards ratings, final grades, skill indicators, all without any additional work really to the teacher beyond just setting up the class initially and entering what indicators a student has met in assignments in the appropriate columns here. So we'll get started. It's been a lot of with remote learning. I've got 3 different classes I have to prep for. All of them need to be rebuilt for detracking, implementing competency-based learning, and of course remote learning, and none of that applied to any of my classes before. So I figured the only way I'm going to survive this semester is to automate everything that is humanly possible. So I figured every hour I spent writing this auto report card would pay off 100-fold, and I want to share it with you because I think I'm just going to save a lot of time in the long run since we have to do this CBL grading anyway. So if we take a quick tour of what we have here, in this green bordered area here, what you can see is this is the only space that for a student's report card that a teacher would enter data into. This is where a teacher would enter which indicators a student has achieved on their assignment. So over here is a list of assignments. This is really actually doesn't have any impact on the grades that are calculated, but it's important to display clear and useful information to students and parents, so you want to make sure this is filled out accurately. I'll explain the ideas of honors medals and how a student earns an honors designation as we go. The most important part of the spreadsheet are these boxes down here that are all labeled too soon right now, and that's because at the beginning of the semester, no assignments have been entered into the teacher input area, so no standards have been met. So it's just too soon for a student's grade to have been calculated by this point. Those are going to change pretty soon. But each of these boxes here, there's 16 of them in the physics class that I have set up. Each of these boxes is a skill standard indicator, right? So what it represents is if a student has demonstrated proficiency in a particular skill by showing knowledge of a particular content standard in an assignment at a level of either below expectations, meeting expectations, or exceeding expectations, then that means that particular indicator is going to be below, met, or exceeded down here in the in the indicator section. So, for example, in physics, one of our content standards is graphing now during remote learning, and one of our cross-cutting science skills is ask and interpret questions. So one of the earlier, on one or more of the earlier assignments in the semester, they're going to focus on this particular indicator, asking and interpreting questions in the context of, creating or interpreting scientific graphs or graphs. So, for example, if you look up here, the standard code for graphs, I've made G for graph. The skill code for ask and interpret questions is Q. So that means if a student meets the indicator on their first assignment, the 1D video analysis project here, I would put GQ in that indicator, and you'll see that the student is now meeting that indicator. We can see that down here in the overall standard rating, it still reads below or not yet, because at least for the physics department, you need to meet expectations in 3 out of the 4 skill standard indicators before your overall rating is meets. But you'll see as we go, that'll populate. So for example, maybe that same assignment, any assignment can focus on one more any of the particular indicators. So maybe on that same assignment, the student met other indicators as well. He met, or she met, the investigate skill that goes along. She or he showed proficiency in investigating concepts while talking about graphs or looking at graphs, and you get something like this, right? And we'll also put a couple of the other indicators, maybe GA as well, so you can see that with all those indicators met on this assignment, the students actually now meets expectations overall in the standard, which isn't enough yet to have a passing grade in the class because we've only met expectations in one standard. So maybe on the next assignment, a student is focused on these two, asking and interpreting questions with regards to graphs, but also with regards to kinematics. And maybe the student shows that she is below proficiency in the KQ indicator, but actually maybe exceeds proficiency in another assignment that touches the GQ indicator. So you can see that now we have a below rating down here and an exceeds rating over here. The overall standard down here still meets because you need, at least according to the department, the physics department has set up, you need 3 exceeds in order for the overall rating to be exceeds. One thing you can do as you go along, this is optional. This is only going to change the display of whether an indicator shows up as too soon to calculate or as not attempted. If I've entered into gradebook more indicators than the student has turned in, so let's see, I know I've entered in a GQ, a GI, a GA, a KQ, but maybe I've also entered into gradebook, or maybe I've also assigned and graded assignments from some other students, a KI, a KA, a KC, but the student just didn't either focus on that in their assignment or had differing priorities. So you can see these, instead of being too soon to calculate, now just changed to not attempted. And if I were to enter these other indicators in the graded by now box, this would also change to not attempt. But it's safe, for your first time trying to use this, you can completely ignore the optional graded by now box, and that's not going to affect anything other than the distinction between too soon and not attempted. Okay, so maybe my student now goes back, doesn't like the fact that they're only meeting expectations in the graphing standards, so they go back and revise their assignment, and they come back and I look and I see, yeah, well now GI and GA are exceeding expectations. So I don't need to erase anything before, I can just add them there, GI, GA, exceeding expectations because they revised their assignment, and now look, the standard has 3 out of the required 3 indicators to make the overall standard show up as exceeds. Now my student gets their act together and finishes maybe the second assignment and meets expectations in KI and KA a couple weeks later. Right, this student is almost at the level of meeting expectations here. Let's say they've also met expectations in KC, that bottom cell there. So now we have expectations met in 2 of the our 4 standards. The physics, if I show you over it here, the definitions a little bit, and we don't need to worry too much about what's in here, but the definitions here show that for a student to receive a grade of a C, they need to have 3 standards that meets proficiency. So if you watch the big letter grade box down here, once we get a 3rd standard to meeting proficiency, this should change to a C. So later on, there's another unit on forces. There's a few assignments. A student might turn in an assignment that's maybe below expectations in the ask and interpret questions indicator, but maybe exceeds expectations in the ask and in the investigate forces indicator, and maybe meets expectations in the other 2, the analyze indicator and the communicate scientifically skill that goes along with forces. FC. So you can see that now that this student is meeting or better expectations in 3 out of the 4 standards in skills in forces, the meets box has populated here. So now that the student is meeting or exceeding 3 out of the 4 skills, 3 out of the 4 overall standard ratings, the final grade has populated as a C, and this student has now, at this point, passed the class and earned credit. Hopefully there is plenty of time left in the semester. Maybe we can try to assume this student is aiming to get an A or a B with an honors designation. So why don't we see what's going to need to happen for that. In our physics PLG, we planned out that in order to get a B, a student would need to meet expectations in all four of the overall standards, and also exceed in 2 of them. So let's see what that would look like. She'll need to meet expectations in the energy column here. So why don't we just fill in? We'll say she did the conservation of energy research project and met expectations and showed competency in all 4 of the skills in that big project. So she gets K, EQ, EI, and you can use commas or semicolons or whatever delimiters you feel, just a space, or you don't even need one. It'll all work. EA and EC. And if you're still not sure where I'm getting these codes from, I'm looking at the standard code. So energy's code is E, the first skill code is Q, so indicator EQ is going to populate this box. Right. For the standard code E and the skill code I, right, if I enter EI anywhere in this in this green bordered teacher input area, the meets box populates. All right. So you can see now this student has meets or exceeds in all 4 of the standards, but the student is still at a C level because there's 4 standards that meets and two standards are required for exceeds. So we should find if we can get the student up, or if the student can get themselves by revising their assignment and going from meets to exceeds in whichever indicators they find to be necessary, the student should have a B. So if I'm this student, I'm saying, look, I've already got exceeds in one of the indicators under forces. Why don't I see if I can revise my CSI Forces Lab and get exceed expectations in these other 2 indicators, FA and FC. Well, good. Now I exceed expectations in 2 out of the 4 standards overall, which according to our physics department definitions is enough for the student to have the B. And this student maybe doesn't quite get to A level because in order to get an A, you need exceeds in all four of these overall ratings, at least according to our physics department definitions. And if your department does it differently, you can change these numbers, although you wouldn't want to do that after assigning this to a student as their report card, because that represents, basically changing the syllabus mid-game. But certainly the point of this template is to be very flexible, so you can set it up for literally any class that you teach as long as you're doing competency-based learning. And I'm going to make another video soon that shows how to customize this template for almost any conceivable class. And I really hope people will find this useful rather than trying to calculate this themselves. A quick note about honors. So the idea, at least the logic that we're using in the physics department, is that if a student earns a B and they earn an honors designation, according to this definition in this box over here, if a student earns a B, they need to qualify for honors in 2 out of the 4 standards in order to receive the honors distinction. So the way I've implemented that is with something called honors medals. A teacher can assign basically, ahead of time when giving an assignment, you can say this assignment, you can earn yourself some honors medals, one or more in a particular standard, right? So let's say that the student when they did this 2D video analysis project with honors, after meeting expectations in enough standards in that project, the teacher would say, yep, you've earned your honor medal in the kinematics standard. So the kinematics standard code is K. I'm going to type a K in here to award that honors medal. And you can see that the student now has 1 honors medal in the kinematics standard. What I've put in at the beginning of the semester is that 2 honors medals in the kinematics standard is going to be required to get the honors distinction in that standard. So maybe the student goes and takes a kinematics, does the honors questions for a kinematics test. Maybe exceeding or meeting some indicators at the same time that might have already been met. But now the teacher, since that assignment's been completed, awards another kinematics honors medal. And now you can see the student has 2 out of the required 2 honors medals in the kinematics standard. That standard is considered achieved honor status. The student doesn't have honors in the class yet because the physics definition is if you have a B, you need to have 2 standards reach honor status. Fortunately, when the student finished the Conservation of Energy Deep Research Project with honors option, they took the honors option and the teacher decided to award the 2 honors medals in the energy standard that was promised. So if I want to award 2 honors medals in the energy standard, and the standard code for energy is E, I would just need to type E twice in this box. And now I have 2, right? I'm awarding 2 honors medals there in the energy standard. So now there are 2 honors medals out of the 2 required. The honors medal populates here. The student now has 2 standards that have achieved honor status. That's sufficient for a B level to earn honors. Now the semester ends and the student's final grade is a B with honors. All right, so the nice thing about this spreadsheet is that I didn't have to do very much work at all beyond actually grading the assignments that I had to do anyway. I had to look at the students' assignments, figure out which indicators the assignments were approaching or below expectations, which indicators meet expectations, which indicators exceed expectations. I input those in this spreadsheet as the student revises or redoes or comes back and makes their own assignment that meets whatever indicators they want. And this is always going to populate with the correct number of standards meeting, exceeding expectations, and the correct letter grade with honors designation should always populate as well. This is very flexible. You can add and change rows, add assignments. You could have students make up the assignments if you want, and as long as it hits the indicators you want, you can give them credit for it. You can actually, for your class, you can change the number of skills. You can make fewer or more skills and fewer or more standards. This algorithm is unbreakable. It's still going to work. The only cardinal rule, the only thing your course actually has to do in order to be able to use this spreadsheet is say that, okay, as long as a student, if they meet an indicator on any particular assignment, then that indicator is also met for the course itself. Right? If a student exceeds in any particular indicator, that indicator is considered exceeds for the course itself. You have a lot of flexibility in the definitions for how many skills you need to be rated. That how many skills you need to achieve to get that overall standard rating there for each level, and also for how many standards you need to get meets, achieves, below, and so on for what grade level. You can change the terminology. Suppose you don't want to call it below and why, you can change this definition and call it approaching, and that's gonna change everything to approaching where that term is, right? So this is very flexible. You can rename your skills to be whatever class you want. You can rename just about anything in here. So this is designed to be a very flexible spreadsheet. I don't want to spend 100 hours this semester competency-based grading, so I've automated it, and I hope that other people can find it useful as well. Thank you. Remember, look out for the next video, how to customize this template for your own classes.